right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Michelle. I'm so excited to have you here as my guest. This is going to be such a good conversation for all of the moms out there who are feeling overwhelmed and busy. I really am excited to hear the expertise you have to offer. So if you wouldn't mind, just start out by introducing yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I feel like between the two of us, we could have the family pretty much covered, right?
Right.
So I'm Michelle Gauthier, and I am a life coach, and I help overwhelmed working women, which is also the name of my podcast, Overwhelmed Working Women, make their life feel more calm and intentional and help them feel more present.
That is something that all women could probably deal,
Yes, I think that is true.
gosh, being a parent, this podcast is about parenting teens, but just being a parent in general, being a mom in general, all of the things that you're talking about, so many moms could use support with that, and
Yes.
they take it all on. So we're definitely going to get into that on this episode. I'm just curious to know what got you into this line of work. What like prompted your interest in helping this demographic?
Yeah, I used to be this demographic, so I understand exactly how it feels to have a big time job and be a mom. And in my case, I had a spouse whose job was actually even busier than mine. Like he was on call a lot, so he was gone during non-businessy kind of hours. And I just got to the point where I felt like I had everything that I ever wanted in life. If I would have said, here's a list of what I want to have, but it really didn't feel good. It was like something was missing. And I think what was missing was me really being there for any of it in terms of even when I was physically with my kids, I wasn't all the way there because I was thinking about work. And when I was at work and sitting in a meeting in, Chicago, I was thinking about my kids and texting my nanny about how they were doing. And so I just felt like I was never really anywhere, even though I quote unquote had it all. So
Yeah.
I was actually listening to a podcast and I heard a life coach being interviewed as the guest on this podcast that I listened to that was about something else. And I just had this moment of like, oh, that's it. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not kidding. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And here I am.
And that's kind of what we do, right? When you step into your passion, it often aligns with something that you struggled with in the past or that you really understand. And being on the other side, or at least working to be on the other side, to be in the position to help other people who are struggling with
Yep.
that same thing.
Yep.
And I know all that you're
Exactly.
talking about, like, I get that too. And I'm wondering too, like, I remember feeling that way when I was working as a teacher and as a mom. I never felt like I was fully present in any area of my life. And I never felt
Mhm.
like I was actually living up my potential in any area of my life. So I was carrying a lot of guilt and just frustration about it all. So I wonder too if, out of curiosity, from the women that you work with, do you find that this is more generalized to women who are working? Or do you see this too with women who are mostly at home or even working from home or have like a side hustle or something like
Mhm,
that?
mhm. Yeah, I would say I've worked with each of those three categories, but primarily the people who I work with have jobs, and they could be jobs that are inside, like they work from home. And could also be that they physically go to work every day. So, although I have coached stay-at-home moms, and obviously that is an extremely stressful job, I don't
Yes.
have as much experience with that demographic as I do the working mom. So, I will answer the question from the perspective of the people who I work with the most, which is, I mean, every time I tell someone what I do, even just sitting in the soccer stands with other parents, they're like, oh, I need that. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like every single mom and a mom who has a job, which is who I usually work with, are just overwhelmed because the way I see it, and this was for sure the case for me personally, is my mom stayed home. She was a great stay at home mom. My dad worked, he did very well at work, and I just took on the role to become both of them and to take those two separate full time jobs as my own. And so putting that kind of pressure on ourselves, I didn't think about that. I didn't consciously choose it, but that's basically what I did. It was like, well, I have the opportunity to do something that maybe my mom didn't, and I can, try to do as well as my dad and my mom. And that's
Mhm.
just, it's too much. It's impossible to be able to live a calm and simple life if you're really truly trying to do two complete full-time jobs.
Yeah. And I wonder, where do you think this push or this desire, and I feel like it's very much part of our generation, where do you think the desire to do it all comes from?
Yeah, because I feel like the idea is that we can. It's like stemming from this lie that,
Yeah.
hey, all you women have an opportunity that women before you haven't had. So take full advantage of absolutely everything that you're able to do now. And I think we haven't yet gotten to the point, and I'm hoping that our daughters will be different in this way, but I think we haven't gotten to the point yet where it's like, that's so great that that is an option for me. And I'm going to choose to do maybe I will stay home part time or maybe I will work, but if I do work, I know I'm going to need some help at home
Mhm.
and, maybe have a spouse who is helpful. Or in my case, I hire people to help because I
Yeah.
don't have a spouse.
Yeah. And that's the thing, too, is that it sounds like we'll probably get to this. One of the really important things to do is to be willing to admit or to ask for help, like to
Yeah.
admit that you can't do it all.
Yeah.
And I know, like, speaking from my personal experience, that's hard to do.
Absolutely. It is. And especially when my particular demographic, and this may apply to you too, is women who have always excelled. So they did
Mhm.
really well in school. They've done really well at work. Every time they have a job, they get the next job. And so that trains our brain so that when we start to feel overwhelmed, we just need to do more. And I
Mhm.
think that comes at home too. So, okay, I feel overwhelmed because my house is a mess. So I'm going to need to stay up until midnight and clean my house. Or even though I've been working all day, it's my child's birthday. I'm obviously not going to buy a cake. I'm going to bake this cake and stay
Of
up all
course.
night baking this cake.
Yes.
Yes, I see you shaking your head. They can't see us, but yes,
Yes.
we're in agreement on this.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so frustrating, as somebody who has experienced this myself. And this feeling of overwhelm happens, it sounds like, from that experience of feeling like you need to continue to do, and solve the problems by doing.
Yes, exactly. Because that is our go to method and it
Hmm.
has worked. So we have evidence that, when I'm feeling a little behind in a class, I can just study extra and then I can still get an A. I can stay up late and I can still get an A. And so we just translate that behavior into our life as a mom. And when we have a job and it stops working when it just
Hmm.
gets to be too much, we can't overcome it with that old method.
What would you say might be some signs that a person who's listening, if they hear this, they're like, oh, that's me. Some signs that you are falling into the category of somebody who is trying to do your way out of this feeling of overwhelm. What might be some signs that that person could recognize? How does it show up for them in their
Mm-hmm.
life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say if you are doing any of those things I just said, so like staying, one of the things I used to do all the time was stay up till like midnight to try to answer all of my work emails so that I could have that empty inbox or
Mhm.
like minimal inbox. But then you just wake up in the morning and it's all there again. So anytime you find yourself just thinking, I'll feel better when I do X. So it's all in the doing. Like when I get the house clean, when I clean out all the cabinets, when I remember when my kids were little, when I'd have to switch out the seasons of their clothes, I'd be like, oh, when am I going to get to that? To be like halfway through winter and I haven't gotten through that job yet. So anytime you're thinking, when I do X, when I get to the bottom of my to do list, which we
Mhm.
never do, that you're putting too much emphasis on the action and you probably need to be instead subtracting things from what you're taking responsibility for.
And when people like me hear that, subtracting, the initial response that I would have or would have had in the past would be just freak out. Well, if I start subtracting, then everything's going to fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
how would you recommend somebody in that kind of fear response respond? What should they
Yeah,
do?
I would say the first response that I usually get is, well, I can't. Okay, we'll start with that. Let's
Yeah.
investigate that a little bit. How is it true that you could? So, one big one would be just anything around the house, especially something that a person, a woman, in my case is usually who I'm talking to, doesn't enjoy doing. Okay, so how could it be possible that someone else could do that job, or that that job just doesn't exist, that that's just not something that your family's going to do right now? And so then we'll brainstorm some ideas. So, for example, one of the things that I do in my family is we have someone who does our laundry. So she comes and picks up our laundry on Tuesdays and she brings it back folded in that KonMari style, beautiful
Oh my gosh.
folding on Wednesdays. It's just in these beautiful baskets on
That's
our front
magic.
porch. And every time I see it, I'm like, oh. And so that it's a simple thing, but there were 2 weeks at the end of the year where Roxy, the person who does our laundry, who I love forever and ever, wasn't available because of the Christmas holiday. And so I did it. And I'm like, okay, no big deal. And I'm happy for her to have a break. And then it was like a week and a half in, I still hadn't finished folding the first load. Stuff had been in the washing machine so long. And it was literally just one little part of my life, but I have it so dialed in that I don't even have to think about it, that when I had to take on that additional task, it felt like so much. So even removing one thing like that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it sounds like outsourcing is the way to
Yeah,
go.
exactly, exactly. And so when I suggest that subtracting, doing less, outsourcing, it's okay if your brain first goes to, I can't do that and I can't afford it. Those are
Oh
like the
yeah.
two things that, come forward at first. And we work through those. As you know from also being a coach, a lot of that is just thoughts that are built in. In my example, I mentioned that my mom was a stay-at-home mom and like an A+ stay-at-home mom. So I had standards that I had made for myself based on her, but
Yeah.
I'm not her. In fact, I'm really not good at a lot of the stuff that she's good at. So that's fine. I can have somebody do my laundry, or somebody like prep meals for me, or order from a
Mhm.
meal service. Or when my kids were younger, I had a babysitter who would pick them up from school so that I didn't pick them up from school. So there's lots of things that I have outsourced. And in some ways, it can save money and time. Like that babysitter who would pick them up from school would bring them home. I paid her for 2 hours to pick them up, bring them home, help them with their homework, unpack their lunches, repack their lunches for the next day, and make sure that the TV room and the kitchen were cleaned up by the time I finished work. Like that to me is
Yeah.
priceless. Paying for 2 hours,
Yeah.
then the whole night has a different feel to it.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because when we as parents are feeling more relaxed, it does rub off on how we parent our kids and how we show up for them, right? And their experience of being around us on the day to day. So, say, for example, you get finished with your work, you come out, and the living room's clean, the lunches are packed. You can just be present with your kids. And how amazing is that?
Exactly. I can listen about their day, or, help them with something they need help with, or watch a TV show that we're all watching together. And it just feels good and less stressful. And I hated when the time that we spent together in the evenings was like, quick, clean this up. Then we got to do this. Then you got to get to bed. And it's
Yeah,
not fun.
right. It's like the taskmaster,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
Exactly.
okay, first of all, how would you recommend somebody discern for themselves what to outsource? How can they decide for themselves what's important to outsource and what's important for them to keep?
Yeah, I always ask them what they hate to do. Why not get rid of the stuff that you don't like in the
Right.
first place? As an example, with picking my kids up from school, the pickup line drove me nuts because it would take me like an extra
Hmm.
hour just to sit in the pickup line. And
Right.
so I actually really loved driving my kids to school, and we would talk on the way. And I really love musicals, and I have season tickets to the theater here. And so we would listen to different musicals and talk about stuff. And it was really fun. It's just an enjoyable time, but the pickup didn't feel the same. And so
Hmm.
when I made my list of what do I hate doing, school pickup was one of them. Packing lunches was one of them. Now that I don't have that nanny anymore, I also don't pack their lunches. My kids pack their own lunches because they're old enough to do that now. I don't actually mind doing laundry, but when it's not done, it makes me feel very unsettled. So I chose that one as well. But if there's stuff that you don't like doing in the first place, just get rid of it.
How
Just,
lovely is that, right?
yeah,
How it
yeah,
just sounds so
exactly.
easy.
It does. It does. I think it's more our thoughts than anything else that
Yeah.
block us from being able to do that.
So for the person who's listening and thinking, I don't have that in my budget to
Mhm.
hire somebody to do these things for me, what would you recommend? Where
Yeah.
could they start?
I would say you could start with, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have teenagers. So I would start with, what can your kids be responsible for? How can they help? How can you, as the mom in the family, be less picky about the way that things get done? Take it to like instead of everything having to be an A+, how can a B+ be okay? So, for example, one of my kids, when the dishwasher gets unloaded, I always think, okay, I know where that thing really goes, and then I know where he puts it. So that's fine. I just go to the different drawer, and that's where I find the knife that I'm looking for, and that's just fine. I'm not going to
Mhm.
make a big deal of it because the dishwasher got emptied.
Yeah. Done is better than perfect.
I think so, but see, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said that.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Perfect was the only way things could be done.
Yes, exactly. And since you can never be perfect, or it can never be done
Mhm.
perfectly enough, you just have to keep working at
Yeah,
trying. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's great twofold because you're giving your teen some responsibility. You're taking stuff off of your plate. They're learning life skills. That's a
Yeah,
great win-win.
exactly. That's what I think. Hopefully I'm making my children into great partners later in life. And I
Mhm.
mean, something I'm not saying at my house is ask your spouse to do it or split the chores with that person. I just happen to be a single mom, so I don't have that. But when I coach people who are married or in a relationship like that, they often bring their spouse in. And a lot of the times, the reason why their spouse doesn't help is because they've been told that the job that they do is not good enough. So
Uh-huh.
again, it's important to turn down, like, grade on a curve.
Yes. Recognize your need to have things be a certain way and work on that. And
Yep.
then get to work finding somebody else who can do that, whatever that task is, so that it's done.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it, right? And
Yep.
the goal and the end picture is that you feel less stressed and less overwhelmed.
Totally. And I
That's the
think,
whole point.
I'm sure you talk about teenagers in their messy bedrooms.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, and so that's just something that I've totally let go of. That's another thing you can
Okay.
do, is just
Yeah.
totally choose to let go of it. When I walk in there and I see the dishes, or one day I was like, why do we have 0 spoons? Oh, they're all in my
Uh-huh.
teenagers' rooms with
Yeah.
like the sticky ice cream bowls
Hmm.
and blah.
All the
Um,
cups.
Yes, cups, all the cups are gone. And I have just chosen to not put my worry in that direction. And I will say, because they have chores around the house that they have to do, eventually they get fed up with their own mess, and they each will take the time to clean up their room sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure one of them has ever been to the standards of my clean, but that's
Sure.
fine. Another
Yeah.
thing is them wearing jackets when it's
Hmm.
freezing cold outside. Okay, go ahead, go forth and be cold if you
Right.
don't want to wear it. There's just so many things that you can choose to just drop, because
Yeah.
you're not, what you think you're affecting, you're not really affecting by like making
Hmm.
them do it. And I almost think it's better for them to learn. I'm
Yeah.
cold. I
A
probably should
natural
have worn a jacket.
consequence.
Yes,
That's something I
exactly.
talk about all the time. Like,
Yes.
let them deal with the consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, first, I'm hearing is to remove things from your task list, to let go of some of these responsibilities so
Yes.
that you can have more space. What else can someone do to feel less overwhelmed?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, this is a bigger, it's not so action oriented. It's more looking at, what is my approach on getting things done normally. So just recognizing, I'm a person who has always tried to do things perfectly. I'm a person who works really hard all the time. And when I feel stressed, I do more. So just knowing that about yourself with no shame. You're not trying to make yourself feel badly, but just know that everything that you do is going to come from that energy. And so
Mhm.
questioning, is that something that I would like to change? Or do I want to keep doing that? Because if you keep doing that, you keep feeling overwhelmed. So that's kind of the first thing I would suggest. And then if you just want to start making some moves, I would take that whole entire to do list. I would cross off some things and drop them. I would assign some of the other things to people in your family. I would outsource wherever possible. And then across the board on all of those, I would just know that it's not going to probably be done to your standards or the way that you want to do it, and sit with the discomfort of that instead of taking on the task.
That's the tricky part, is sitting with the discomfort of it.
Yep, exactly. And it might not feel good,
Yeah.
and that's okay. Even when I had a nanny when my kids were little, I had to tell myself, if I want her to be exactly like me, then I have to do this. Like, I have to quit my job and stay home with my kids full time if I want them to be raised by 100% of the time, everything. And I started
Mhm.
working on noticing and like keeping evidence in my mind of how my nannies, I had like two or three over time who were really important and special to our family. And they taught the kids things that I don't even possess, things they
Mhm.
knew about, places they would take them, ways that they would allow them to play. And I started to appreciate the different ways that they do things. And I think we can take
Mhm.
that lesson and apply it to everything that we don't do ourselves. Even the employees who work for you, maybe they can come up with a different way than you've done something. And it'll probably feel uncomfortable when you see it done a different way the first time. But can that be okay? Is there any way that could be good or even better than the way you've been doing it?
Yeah, that's a good reminder is that just because it's not you or done your way doesn't mean that it's not as good.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm
Mhm.
also not suggesting that you give away everything in your life and say, I'm just not going to care about anything. Just pick the things. Like, for example, I would never have anyone put my laundry away, organize my closet, probably even make my bed. Those are things that I like done in a certain way that make me feel calm. It's worth it for me to keep them. So
Mhm.
it's fine to keep things like that, but it just can't be everything unless you want to keep feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about that? Go back to the dissatisfaction that you mentioned earlier. I definitely hear this in a lot of women in my generation, moms that I work with, is just this general feeling of when they're hitting their midlife and their kids are nearing this teen years. It's like, well, what now? I had all these things that I had wanted for myself, and I'm checking off all the boxes, yet I still feel unfulfilled.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I definitely see that a lot too. In fact, that's kind of one of the times in life when people come to talk to me is I'm so busy, but I feel unfulfilled. And usually, like if I were to ask that person a few questions at the beginning, and one would be, well, what do you like to do? What do you do for fun? How do you spend your free time? And it's like, I don't know and nothing
Yep.
because they've dedicated so much of their life to being the mom, being the boss, running the family. Often, if you're an overachieving working mom, you're also putting together like your big family get togethers and you're in charge of your friend vacation and you're, leading a
Hmm.
charity event at your school. So it's kind of like all across the board. They're excelling at doing things for other people, but not doing really anything for themselves. So it's hard for them to know, what do I like to do? What would make me
Hmm.
feel fulfilled? And when people come to me with that, they always say, I feel so silly. And I'm like, it's not silly. It makes so much sense that it got to this.
Right. It's really good for us to even be having this conversation to normalize that it's a thing because I know there can be a lot of shame around that. I've experienced that myself is I have all of these wonderful things in my life, yet I still feel like something is lacking. And it really does go back to connecting once more with myself because when we become moms, we're giving, 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 especially during the baby toddler years.
Hmm.
And then I've talked about this a lot on my podcast about how there's this kind of a slow breakup, right? You're just a slow pulling away. You're still connected, but you have more personal time, right? You're still busy
Yeah.
with life, but you have more personal time. And the things that you loved to do before you had kids may not be the same things that you love to do now. So, how do you recommend somebody who is like, I don't know what I like, I don't know what to do for fun? What would you recommend that they do?
Yeah, I would say a good place to start would be think about your ideal day. If you had a day that was a Saturday and your family was out of town, what sounds like a lot of fun for you to do? And maybe someone would think, oh, I'd love to have coffee with my best friend from college who I haven't talked to in forever. Or I think I'd just like to be alone and read a book and just starting to daydream about what sounds like fun. I do think it's also interesting to say, well, let's see, when you were 20, you used to like to run marathons. Do you still like to run marathons? No, but I really do miss the camaraderie of working out with other women. Okay, there's a
Mhm.
clue. Maybe go try out. And so I would say brainstorm it and then just go try out a couple of things with no commitment and see how you like it. Maybe join some kind of volunteer group. I had a client recently who tried out like 5 different things things. She did pickleball lessons. She volunteered. She made blankets for a hospital, and she just did all of them. And then the blanket making one was the one that really kind of stirred her soul. And she's like, that's what I want to do. It's not a huge, big, different thing that I've been doing, but it makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm doing something that I enjoy.
And how great to be able to have a partner walking alongside you and supporting you along this journey. First of all, just normalizing these uncomfortable emotions that you're having, helping you sort out how to manage them, and also helping you figure out what it is that will bring you joy, what will bring you fulfillment and happiness, because it's so hard to do those things on your own. Life gets in the way. You get busy with the everyday tasks, and a lot of women just put themselves last. I'll get to that win. I'll get to that win. And then their kids move out and they're like, my life is like empty now. I don't have anything for me.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like what you're really providing for the clients you work with, the women you work with, is like a support, like a loving support by their side to help bridge that gap from like their former life and before kids to where they're going into their beyond years.
Yep, that is definitely true. And it's not, you wouldn't come and coach with me to become someone totally new, even though you think that might be what it is. It's really to get back to your core self, who you really are. And that's the reason why when you have everything, air quotes, have everything, that it doesn't feel right, because you're not in that most authentic self when you're not doing anything for yourself and you feel like you're never present.
Yeah. And having someone there to help you reconnect with that, it's life-changing.
Yeah, especially for a woman who doesn't have time to like get up and go to the bathroom during a work day, to make the time. The first step in finding out how to take care of yourself is to hire a life coach off, and just to somebody to say, I'm going to dedicate 1 hour a week and I'm going to talk to this person, and that's going to be my gift to myself that I'm going to dedicate. Because how often are you going to sit around and be like, I'm going to take an hour and just journal and think about what I'm thinking about things? No, it's never going to happen, right?
Yeah, that sounds so fun. I'm just going to think about thinking.
Yeah, exactly. Just going to sit here in the corner and think for a while. I'd be like 2 minutes and I'd have the grocery list going. And
I was working with a client once, and she called me her professional friend.
Oh, I love it. That's so sweet. Yeah. It is funny. I mean, life coach to life coach, it is funny how much you love and care for your clients. It's like, I am on your side. I've got your back. I'm cheering you on, all those things. So a professional friend is a great one. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if my listeners are hearing what you're saying and being like, I need some support with this, I really want to work with Michelle, how can they find you? And how can they work with you?
So they can go to my website, which is michellegauthier.com. And there you'll have there's a work with me tab, and you can look and see if you'd be interested in doing group coaching or one-on-one coaching. And then there's also a tab there for my podcast that links to the episodes of Overwhelmed Working Woman. So if you just want to get started by learning how to create a boundary or saying no or how to change your expectations of people, I have episodes on all that stuff. So that could be just a real quick, more learning if you want to do that as well.
And I'll be sure to put links to all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening, you can head down there and check it out. Definitely follow Michelle, listen to her podcast. She's got a wealth of information, and she's going to help you not only be a better parent, but be a better person, enjoy your life more. It's been a pleasure having you here on the show. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here.